Hey everyone, another episode of the Indie Hour. We are back with episode 28. We are checking out Space Wreckers by Hector Klegg. Now, this was nominated by the GMG patrons, selected weekly from a list of many games, which they put into a list and nominate, and we do a poll on. And if you haven't seen this show before, this is the show where we take a look at indie games. We basically try and shine a light on stuff you might not have heard of, and typically try and show off the fact that there are a million non-mainstream games out there for people to play. If you got a miniature collection, if you're tired of playing sort of standard games, if you want to look for something different, there is a vast array of what's out there. And so I will probably be doing this until I die, or so the patrons tell me. So this week's selection is a fully self-published game called Space Wreckers, where you work on the behest of the GRL, the Galactic Reclamation League. Basically what happens is shit gets lost in space. People lose something. And registered wreckers are these ne'er-do-well crews of space, not pirates necessarily, but reclamation specialists. Think of it halfway between Garbage Man and Bounty Hunter, and these crews will go and try and find whatever it is you've lost for, the right price. And you get to design one of these crews. Now, a couple things up front about this game that you guys might find interesting. First things first, it's a kitchen table game. You'll hear me use that term a whole bunch. That means it's typically played on a space, about the size of a kitchen table. So 3 feet by 3 feet or smaller is typically what I would consider a kitchen table game. This one's designed for that space in mind, 3 feet by 3 feet, but it does give some provisos for if you are playing in really dense terrain, like instead of a spaceship, an underground war, and Space Hulk style terrain, you can play it on a smaller board like 2x2. Second thing is, it is fully diceless except for tracking your injuries and damage. It recommends using dice for tracking things like your toughness and your hit points, but not for anything else because there's no RNG in this game. You're simply adding up sums and dividing up damage, and all results happen automatically. So if you're fighting in combat, for instance, your strength is just summed up, your reduced toughness, and you put across blocks and strikes, and dudes just hit each other. You just apply damage. Third upfront thing, this beta rulebook is completely free. You can download it on their website right now. It's got a little crew creation chart here too, which is really cool. So if you did want to, use an Excel sheet basically to make the rules or to make the crew, it does save you some time because the bulk of this rulebook is crew creation. It's only about 10 pages of core rules, and then a bajillion options for specializing and making your crew. Those are my upfront things. And if that's what you're looking for, then it is very much your type of game. If you like crew customization, miniatures agnostic, which means use whatever models you like, this is probably the game for you. The art style obviously has been done in this like 1970s sort of like look. But the last thing that's worth noting is the use of AI. And Hector puts in a big thing here that because he's doing this for free right now, it's totally not monetized. And because he is not making any money from it, he's used AI for some of like the concept art that he wants to use. But his plan is that if he starts monetizing it, he will then pay artists to do the art in the future. And this is the look that he's going for. I'm of two minds about this. One, if this is an independent developer and they're not planning on making money off of it and they're using generative AI as a prompting thing just to get across the idea of what they're trying to do, okay, great. Two, I prefer artists get paid for their work, and I'm not a huge fan of generative AI for its environmental impact reasons. Although I have dabbled with it just to see what it does, I do feel a little bit of a crisis of conscience about it. So I will say I do appreciate the fact that he didn't just, put this stuff up here and not, say that they're using AI, and that because I don't think his first language is English, he's using a language chatbot to do his translation as well. Yeah, these are tools that exist and people use them all the time. My personal opinion and take on it is what I just said, but that doesn't make me right, and it doesn't also make my opinion the most popular one. I know there's a lot of people that are huge fans of AI and use it all the time, but I did appreciate the integrity of at least putting up a use of AI notice here on their website, as opposed to just throwing it out there and never even mentioning it, because there's tons of shovelware out there that does that every day, all the time. So like I said, out in the boundless cosmic sea, a vessel houses a hapless crew, each one a denizen of fate's fickle embrace. That's not kind of sound AI. They're the Space Wreckers, grizzled members of the Galactic Reclamation League, making their living as the interstellar errand runners of the galaxy. Day by day, they hover on the fringe of anticipation, eagerly awaiting a transmission of their next potential payday from the GRL, the Galactic Reclamation League. In a domain where competition is as fierce as a solar flare, these souls engage in an unending struggle to outwit and outwork their fellow GRL members. In the unforgiving vacuum of space, there exists treasured items adrift on forsaken spacecraft or left behind on hastily abandoned planetary outposts, and these scavengers of the stars are determined to reclaim them. So yeah, that's the boilerplate for this. And I will say, I do love the 1970s art style he's picked. This Mobius style of science fiction art is my absolute favorite type of sci-fi art. It very much it very much heralds back to my childhood, and therefore I have a certain fondness for it. So regardless of the use of generative AI, at least his prompts are of my particular taste. He has got a little Instagram page here too, where you can see some of his work that he's been doing on it, and the fact that he's put up his core rulebook on Wargames Vault as well for free. So let's dive in and check out the rules themselves. All right. So we got, like I said, this is not a long rule book, and most of it, like the core rules of the game, are down to page 14. There is where the crew creation starts. First 2-3 pages are lore, and then we're into the core rules of the game. So this was written in 2023. I've already given you the sort of like short form version of the lore in the Galactic Reclamation League. It's exactly what you think of it. It's a Firefly style mission. Pick your Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon. Pick your space garbage men that you like. You can even go with Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone with Michael Ironside and Molly Ringwald. If you've seen that one, you are my people. Yeah, Michael Ironside playing a guy called Overdog. You'll never forget this movie if you finally see it. It's got Ernie Hudson from fucking Ghostbusters in it. A real treasure. So like I said, this is any miniatures game. Board is 2x2 or 3x3. You use the type of terrain that you want to represent the science fiction that you're going for. And then in the game itself, during the game, a player will need to track their hit points, durability, which is their toughness, their experience points, and any statuses that might affect them. So statuses would be like tokens. And then they recommend using a D20 for their hit points, a D6 for the durability, which is their toughness, and then some like pen and paper for XP over the course of the game. And that's all you're going to use dice for. And then talking about the future, this is the free beta version of the Space Wreckers rulebook. We invite you to provide feedback about your experiences playing our game. Please let us know if anything's confusing, too powerful, too weak, too expensive, unfun, or doesn't play as intended. And then you can message them from social media or on their website. All right. Core rules. A human, mutant, or alien crew member before any modifications, which is all in the crew building stuff, will have the following stat line. So 4-inch move, 2 strength, 2 toughness, 15 hit points, and 4 intelligence. So like I said, movement, maximum number of inches. They can move in a single action. Strength, the additional damage applied to weapons in melee combat. So basically, if you are hitting someone in melee, then you're going to add that to your total damage. Toughness, the total amount of damage they can negate in a single turn. So those are blocks, basically. Hit points, the amount of damage a fighter can take before it's removed from the game instead of action. And then intelligence, the value in combination with its current hit points to determine the solve and manifest actions. So solve are actions that might need a threshold, like let's say solve 15. A solve 15 action would be something like opening a door or interacting with a computer. And then you might need multiple action successes in order to successfully solve something. So if it's like solve 15 times 2, you'd have to take 2 actions at that threshold to do it. And multiple characters can add together and stuff. So the game, each game is your actual full game. Every turn, normally 4 to 5, is a full set of activations between both sides. Activation is a single miniature, taking 2 actions, and then each action is done from the following list. So move up to the maximum of the fighter's movement value. Engage, this is move into combat with an enemy fighter in your maximum movement value. Shoot, which is fire a ranged weapon at a suitable target. Attack, attack an enemy target with a melee weapon. Disengage, which is move to 2 inches away but take 2 damage from a free strike. Which you could potentially negate with your toughness. Manifest, which you use a spell or a psychic power. Solve, that's the miscellaneous action for puzzles and objectives and stuff. And then hide, to duck behind cover and remain hidden, unable to be targeted at a range of 6 or greater. So if you're outside 6 inches and you're hiding, you can't be shot. Movement, move the fighter to its maximum movement value. So they can move any surface unless stated otherwise, but it has to finish its movement on a flat surface, kind of infinity rules. Climb action is at half your movement value, so you can move vertically, but you gotta go slow. A fighter can move through a friendly crew fighter, but not an enemy one. And they must remain in contact with the game board when determining if they can move around an enemy fighter. Engagements. When you move in and you charge, you automatically do a damage when you first enter combat. And then now you can make the attack action. And then combat. When engaged in base contact with an enemy fighter, you're considered to be in combat. And to fight in combat, the fighter must have an action available to them this turn. So if you shot and then engaged, you wouldn't be able to still make a fight action that turn. But all attacks and blocks are made at the same time and resolve at the end of each combat action. Damage dealt by each fighter is equal to the strength plus their weapon damage. So let's say you had a weapon damage of 2 and a strength of 2, you do 4 damage to somebody. Damage is reduced by subtracting your toughness from the damage result, and if the fighter can block, the block value is then subtracted as well. So let's say first, if I did 4 damage and I'm toughness 2, I'd go down to 2. If you have any block, so like let's say you have a weapon with parry where you can block a damage, or you're wearing armor that can block damage, you could reduce it down to 0, for example. The example here is Fighter A has strength of 2, so adds to its weapon damage of 3 for a total of 5. Fighter B has a toughness 2, so it reduces the damage to 3. Fighter B can block a damage, which takes it down to 2, and then they lose 2 hit points. Fighter B has no remaining toughness to mitigate damage that turn, so that's why you use a d6 to do toughness. It's just temporary damage reduction. But in that next turn, you're going to get to have the toughness come back up, right? So once everyone's activated, you get your toughness back. And strength is applied once per combat action rather than per weapon. During a combat action, if the enemy fighter automatically makes a deferred combat action response, while the 2 fighters attack each other simultaneously, the enemy defers its combat action and loses an action in the next activation that represents its combat action during your turn. If 2 attack actions are made against an enemy, that enemy makes 2 deferred combat actions, but still has the option to make a disengage action. So even if you are starting in contact with somebody and you attack them twice and they attack back twice, you still would have a 0 action kind of where you could just fall back if you wanted to. You're not stuck there. In a single turn, a fighter can only mitigate damage equal to its modified toughness value. All damage dealt to the figure would reduce a fighter's hit points. If your toughness is 0, it goes right to hit points minus any block. A fighter that's equipped with an item with the block value can mitigate their damage taken by an amount equal to block value in each activation. So you get your block value in each activation, not in each attack. And a fighter not equipped with a melee weapon can make a barehanded attack during combat just using their strength. Disengage, you fall back 2 inches but take 2 damage. Shooting, the fighter makes a ranged weapon attack. It's in range of visibility, and this will affect the range of the weapon but doesn't affect their damage. So for instance, a pistol, a max range of 8. A rifle has a max range of 12, a cannon a max range of 16, and then the carrying hands requires 1, 2, or 3 with a star. A cannon doesn't actually require 3 hands to fire, but it's unwieldy and cannot be easily swapped with a side weapon, such as a one-handed melee weapon. There are items or abilities that allow a fighter to use both the cannon and an additional weapon. A valid range shot at a target always hits, but is altered depending on the distance from the target, whether it's in cover or not. So everything has a range of lethal or pot shots. So lethal range weapons get +2 damage if they're exposed, and no mods if they're a pot shot. And then in cover, it's going to be -1 or -2 damage. So the closer you are, the more damaging you are, and the more you offset cover. Measure from the base of your fighter to the enemy's base, and then in cover or exposed is totally in the open, and then in cover is if your base and trade obscuring is at least 1 centimeter tall. So you can be not exposed by being through behind grass and stuff like that, but if you have a solid object, at least 1 centimeter, a ½ inch tall, then you're going to be in cover. And then for each hit, apply the damage profile and effects of the weapon and or any special ammunition. So you have those 3 classes of weapon, but they can still be different kinds of weapon on top of that with different damages and abilities. And then damage is reduced by subtracting the target's toughness from the damage dealt. In a single turn, a fighter can only mitigate damage equal to its modified toughness. All damage dealt above a figure would reduce its fighter's hit points. And some have ranged block, which again is like block, but for ranged attacks instead of melee, it could be like power armor and stuff like that. All right, so solve. So this is kind of a generic action for doing objectives, for breaking down doors, for doing some kind of complex computer action. And it'll have a high value, which is supposed to be equal to or beaten by your hit points plus your intelligence. And that's kind of your general well-being, your ability to manipulate objects, like hack a computer, pry open a chest, whatever that sort of thing is. and you may need to do additional consecutive solve actions to meet the threshold. Both the actions must be the same activation, and each solve figure is added to the previous solve figure. So like if you're making 2 actions, like let's see, we'll get 9 hit points left and an intelligence of 3, you'd add to a total of 12. That doesn't beat the 15. If you do the next action, 12 plus 12 is 24, you're going to beat the solve threshold. You can also defer the solve to complete 3 or more consecutive solves to meet the threshold, and you retain the solve figure for next turn. Basically, if you keep doing the action over and over again, you keep adding up to beat the threshold. Friendly fighters can also defer actions if they're in the base contact with the thing too. So like, let's say you've got a guy, another guy standing next to each other, and they're both on the objective marker. They could, the first one does the solve action. The other one can get a -1 action marker and defer an action to add their thresholds together. So like 2 injured fighters with like a total of like 8 and 11 each could solve a solve 17 thing by the first one doing the action, the second one adding their own threshold. So it's basically just doing sums to see if you can get enough wherewithal to do whatever the task is. Manifest, it's a type of solve action, but it's done for like your psych abilities. And then hide, a fighter can choose to take cover and hide, and a hidden figure cannot be targeted by ranged weapons distance greater than 6 inches away, even when visible to the enemy. Whenever the hidden fighter takes an action, it automatically loses the hidden benefit until it uses the hide action again. And then we've got a few different like statuses, like fear. If you become fearful, you lose 2 intelligence and deal 1 less damage in each of its combat and shooting actions. Stunned, you lose an action in your next activation. And knockback, you're moved 2 inches directly away. If a fighter's knocked back into base contact with a wall or terrain feature, it becomes stunned. If it's knocked back into contact with their fighter, then both fighters become stunned. You get like thrown down and knocked into each other. Falling, a fighter that's knocked back off the edge of a platform will fall. A fighter that falls is placed directly underneath the edge from which it fell and takes damage equal to the distance it fell in inches. And then finally jumping down, you can jump down, but you can't go farther than like 4 inches because there's a lethal sort of like distance for jumping. If you can fly, you can move horizontally, vertically, and vertically up to its full movement value, and fighters with fly can move through friendly and enemy fighters. And then finally, if you jump, you can jump over a gap in a terrain that's less than an inch. You now know how to play Space Records. Let's create a crew. That's it. That's the whole sum of the rules for the game here on page 13. All right. So the vast majority of the rest of this rulebook, which goes up to almost 50 pages, is going to be based on crew generation. So this is where most of the crunch of this game is going to sit. And for a certain player, this is it, man. This is their favorite thing, is making crews, tinkering. And there's a lot of meat on the bone here for people that want to do that. So to generate your crew configuration, select a composition, a specialty, and a trait. And these 3 things are going to combine together to make like the style of crew you have. So let's talk about like the Ghostbusters, for instance. They might be blue collar, science-based, I don't know, exterminators. Those could be 3 things you would add together to then make their like background and lore. So we've got a whole bunch of like options here of like things that we can add together. And composition could be things like tyrannical leadership. This would be the Dread Captain Barbossa style of leadership. The benefit is the fighter designates the crew leader, gains an additional 3 to any stat, or 1 toughness and 1 to any other stat, which is pretty cool. And then limitation, if the crew's leader is taken out of action, for the remainder of the active crew becomes fearful for the rest of the game. So you have a really cool leader, but then your basic guys become like kind of like more cowardly if he gets knocked out. Attuned, the benefit, up to 3 psychic users are permitted, 1 for each psychic school, and limitation, all fighters of the crew have their reduced strength and toughness by 1. So you're sickly. You're the kids from Akira. Pack Alpha, benefit, no restrictions on beasts. Any number of species are allowed, and beasts can make solve actions. You got smart dogs. Take that, Last Days. That writer was dumb. And then limitation, only 1 human model is permitted. So it's like you and like your crew of tribbles. And then inspiring leadership, benefit, the fighter designated as the crew leader can select 2 embodiments. And then limitation, if the crew leader is taken out of action, the remainder of the crew becomes stunned for a turn because they're like, oh no, he's the linchpin of everything. And then jack of all trades, benefit, this crew gains additional specialty. And limitation, they don't get a trait instead. So you basically get 2 specialties instead of having a trait. And then finally, one-man army like ODB. He's on, never been taken out. He makes MCs looking out. Benefit, your single human fighter can be activated twice per turn. You may choose to take your second action in any order, providing the enemy crew has activated at least half their crew. And limitation, this crew may only ever have one human fighter and starts with 500 credits rather than 800 credits. You get Beastmasters, so benefit, able to make beasts and have one beast per human fighter. There must always be a 1-to-1 ratio, and limitation whenever a human fighter is taken out of action, a beast must be designated as stunned for the remainder of the game, because it's sad, because it lost its friend. And then Wretched, these are for rogues only. Benefit, crew members have a base cost of 50 rather than 100, but limitation, all humans must use the Wretched human stat line, because you're scumbos. You could use this for like a cult army or some kind of like, they're not very good style of army, untrained crew. Your only movement 3, strength 1, 0 toughness, 8 hit points, and 2 intelligence. You can be heavily mutated. You can be aliens and use the alien profile generator. You can be bounty hunters, treasure hunters, Sats Pox Contagious. So this is the Geller Pox basically. You'll be assassins, raiders, slavers, bandits, fanatics, salvagers. So like you can improve any solve action by 3 on interactions. The crew salvage items in the area to sell, gain additional 25 credits by the end of the game. And then now you get your traits. So these were all of our specialties. These are the things that like you do really well, like you're a bounty hunter or something like that. And then we have our remaining sort of like traits. This is like the thing that you're good at, like you're a fanatic. And then finally you got your crew statuses. And traits are things like you could have like a physical trait, like you're etheric, use the etheric school abilities and one fighter becomes a psychic. Distortion, access to the distortion school abilities and one fighter becomes psychic. Kinesis, again, you become psychic. You can just be resilient and get +1 toughness. Deadly, +1 to strength, +1 to intelligence. Mighty, +2 strength, and wise, +2 intelligence. So you pick one of these and it applies to everybody on the crew, and it's just kind of like their thing. You know what I mean? So like, this is sort of like the different traits for the gangs in Necromunda. Like, so you could say that mighty would be like the Goliath trait. Deadly could be the Escher trait. Wise could be the Van Sar trait. Resilient could be the Orlok trait. And then you got like your weird power ones for the other traits. So it's like the physical differentiation between the different crews. Once you pick those 3 things, then you get your crew status. So before the game begins, you must decide whether your crew is a part of a large corporate outfit, an independent GRL sanctioned crew, or rogue. So one of those 3 things, basically, how do you operate in the universe? If you're a corporate, your armory have access to all common weapons and equipment, but no rare items. If you're sanctioned, you have free access to all weaponry equipment. And if you're black market, you must roll for the availability of weapons and armor modifications, access to 2 of each post per game phase. So like you get like all the extra stuff. But then for your rewards for corporate, a portion of the chore reward is retained by the corporation. 50 credits is awarded to the crew. However, the crew is paid a wage at the end of each game of 25 credits. So like, you have a base salary that you're always getting, but you got to pay back 50. Like you have to basically like pay back, the rest of it to the corporation end of it. And then you get 50 on top. You get 100 credits if you're the sanctioned. And if you like do a standard chore, and then for the rogues, sell the item or information on the black market for a premium, you get 125 credits. So you make more money, the more crazy sort of you are, but there's less security, just like in real life. Chores, additional support granted with chores, choose in what order the opponent deploys their crew, and +2 to all solve objectives. And then standard information, follow the normal rules for deployment, and then limited information must deploy on the board first, and the opposing crew selects your deployment zone. So you basically have better intelligence, more eyes in the sky, more like drones and stuff to check things out. And then there's the normal injury table with a sanctioned crew, but they can opt to use the rogue injury table from the beginning of the season if they want as well. So it's normal, but with a choice if they want, and then rogue for the rogues. But if both crews are corporate, you get no additional support with chores. And then your embodiments. A leader should embody the specialty of their crew. They should be the most competent and experienced in your chosen field, and will select an embodiment from the table below. So this is making your leader unique. Aside from the narrative choices and the embodiment selected, a leader's role is no different from the rest of the crew. Select a fighter to become your leader and select an embodiment that represents the specialty of the crew. Unless otherwise specified, only one embodiment can be selected for your leader. Crews that have 2 specialties must select one embodiment from either. Unless otherwise stated, the embodiment only affects the leader and the actions they take. So like bounty hunters, they get a 1 point times percent value of the bounty bonus. I don't think it's 1.5%. I think it's you multiply everything by 100 to like 150%. So it's like a 1.5 times value. And you may re-roll the assigned bounty at the start of the game. On the discovery phase, so for treasure hunters, you can roll d6 once. If you roll 24 or higher during a discovery, you can collect an additional rare item. Contagious, increase the range effect to 6 inches. Reduce the movement value of nearby 3-inch enemies. Reduce the movement value of nearby, bracket 3 enemies. And 1 inch by 1 inch, and reduce the intelligence of nearby enemies by 1. So people get slower and dumber around you, I guess. Reading that broke my brain. Assassins move additional inch when hidden. And then solve actions made while hidden are increased by 3. I didn't think you could do anything while you were hidden, so I don't know what that skill does. That feels like a hole in the rules just now. Cool that you can take actions while hidden, I guess. And then raiders may make a solve action instead of a shooting action. This fighter can deploy within 1 inch of any board edge that is within at least 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone. So basically you can like sneak on. Slavers, they can do things like capture an enemy on a solve 8. So like you can like steal people basically. When this fighter captures an enemy for the first time each game, they cause the enemy crew to become fearful. He like just like ties you up and kidnaps you. And we got bandits. Before the first turn, they can move on a single interactive marker to anywhere further than 9 inches away from an enemy. So basically like you move like an objective and stuff like that. And can move one enemy fighter up to 4 inches from starting position to deployment. So like you have a thing where like you use noisemakers and like lure people out, and you move the objectives like you do like sort of like false ops to make things not where they appear to be. Fanatics cause fear to all enemies within 3 inches and increase their combat damage by 2 when within 9 inches of an enemy that causes fear, because they go freaky crazy when they fight something that's scary. And then Salvagers, able to reroll a hazard once per interaction and can deploy an additional shortcut and hazard before the start of the game. This must follow the normal rules for an active deployment. So that's your leader's like shtick, basically. Is he like an assassin? Can he, make people like, I don't know. Contagious is a weird one to have on here, but I guess it makes sense. You could make a bunch of narrative reasons for it. And then you can be aliens. And the aliens can have all kinds of different traits. You select your 2 for your morphology. So like you could have wings and fly, thick fur to be increasing your toughness by 1 against ranged attacks. Caustic blood, whenever taking damage in melee, cause 2 damage back to the attacker. Powerful bite can make an additional attack at 2 damage. Strong legs, increase your movement by 1. Slimy skin, reduce damage suffered when disengaging by 2, so take no damage when you disengage. And you may now alter the base stats. You can make a total of 2 changes to any stat. Each increase in stat reduces another stat by 1. Toughness counts as both changes. So this is your way to create an alien and also reduce and change its stats. So you start with a human basically, and if you want to change up stats, then something else goes down by 1. So you're basically pushing the stats around effectively. Weird mutants. Now these all have a cost associated to them. So you notice up until this point, nothing had a cost, and it's basically their free selections are balanced out. Now we get into like things that actually cost you. So 800 is normally what you're going to get to spend. 500 if you took that weird army of 1 selection. So genetic mutations are very prevalent. You get, if we've learned anything from the films of Paul Verhoeven, then we knew that's true. Third eye, so like your damage done by ranged weapons goes up by 1. Enormous forearms, reduce the carrying requirement of cannons to 2. So you can carry a cannon and still carry like a melee weapon. A tentacle arm, reduce the distance an enemy can disengage by 1 inch. They can only down 1 inch. And these all have like a cost. Horns do 3 damage when engaging an enemy because you headbutt them. A stubby foot, so these are negative mutations. They don't have a monetary cost. They're costly enough to the unfortunately affected. I don't know why you would take these then. Can't climb, increase the severity of injuries by 2. Each beneficial mutation must also have a random negative mutation applied to the same crew member, except for the first mutation applied. So basically every mutation after the first that you buy, you got to take one of these other ones. Like sensitive ears take additional 2 damage from grenades, or misshapen head, you can't wear helmets. That's really funny. Psychic abilities, and again, you have to buy these. You can astral project. So there's etheric, distortion, and kinetic, like the 3 different styles. Like you can shapeshift with etheric, you can materialize, conjure an object from the air, and you select from grenades and consumables. So like that's basically Link making grenades out of nothing with his iPad in Breath of the Wild. Healing, like with the distortion, you can heal your own crew members, yourself, levitate, petrify people, turn them into rocks. Look at weirdo eyeballs set there. And then the kinetic stuff is all moving things around. So psychokinesis to like shove targets, pyrokinesis, make guys, like light on fire, ergokinesis to influence electricity and stuff. You can buy beasts. Each crew, unless stated otherwise, can have a single beast crew member. So this is like your one ship's pet that you can buy, unless you took like the Beastmasters one or the Team of Beasts one. You get scorpions, monkeys, crows, frogs, lizards, bats, rats, bears, wolves, dogs, and cats. You can have a Jonesy if you want from Alien. And they've got their own stat lines. So like a standard core stat line. It's like a wolf is like move 5, strength 3, toughness 4, 12 hit points, and intelligence 2. And he can hunt. Increase movement by 2 inches towards units within 18 inches that are less than half starting wounds. Basically, he'll move faster towards stuff that's bleeding. And then crows, they can haunt, increase the combat damage by 2 to enemies within 6 inches that are less than half starting wounds. Basically, he has an aura that makes people think they're going to die, so they do die. And then equipment. Your crew is made up of a number of fighters purchased to a cost of 100 credits each and outfitted with a variety of weapons and equipment. And during crew creation, you have 800 credits to spend building your crew total. So any number of fighters at a cost of 100 credits each, with a variety of weapons and equipment. So it's 8 fighters. I guess your leftovers can get spent on the animals and stuff like that. And then crews can purchase weapons, items, and consumables before each game. Each fighter has a carrying capacity of 3, but a maximum of 2 hands at any time. That's why the cannon's 3-handed. So bare hands cost you nothing. And then whatever, if you buy like 2 things, so like if you buy a piercing weapon in each hand, it costs you 6 for the second hand. Right, so 24 or 42 if you're going to have one-handed and two-handed weapons. So like barehanded, all warriors get this. Sticking blade, -1 damage if the enemy is wearing armor. But it's cheap. Blunt weapons cause the enemy to become stunned. Piercing weapons cause an enemy an additional damage if they're wearing armor. Slicing weapons cause 2 additional damage to targets unarmored. Deflecting weapon blocks 1 point of damage per attack. Scepter, focus, increase the fighter's intelligence by 1. Whip, attack up to 3-inch range, including enemies already engaged in combat. Combat damage dealt outside the combat range will not be responded to by the enemy fighter. So don't even fight back if you get whipped. It's the Indiana Jones attack. They have a fighting claw, bucklers to block, shields and bulwarks to block 3 damage in melee. And then weapon mods. So on top of having like a weapon, you can also modify it to be like serrated. They do 2 additional damage if you do damage. Weighted, just +1 damage per attack. So it's heavy. Battery overcharger. Damage dealt by this weapon can be overcharged with a burst of electricity to knock people back. Give it a grip to cause 2 additional damage when engaging an enemy. Spiked, cause 2 damage to any enemy within 3 that's not the target of the attack, basically on your backswing. And then conductor, your intelligence goes up by 1. And there are 6 basic types of weapons. So you've got pistols, rifles, cannons, sniper rifles, sniper cannons, and bows. And you can see here they all have their damage rating, their range, the number of hands they take up, and their cost. So you are definitely not buying a sniper cannon right away or a sniper rifle. I guess you could buy a sniper rifle, nothing else. But a sniper cannon is 130 points. And you can modify them with different kinds of ammunition. But these are rare. So things like clinging ammunition, like sticky guns, flash ammunition, poison rounds. This is the Mr. Korg of Borderlands of it all, where you get to like give them weird bullets. Fighters can wear armor. Only 1 piece of armor can be worn at any time except for a helmet that can always be worn. So you got like, rigid body armor. Your toughness can go up by 1, 2, 3, or 4 based on the different costs. And then helmets and anti-ammo vests block opponent damage per range attack. Armor can be modified with personal modules. These can be as simple as a gruesome adornment or as complex as reality warping effects. So things like oxygen injectors to increase your intelligence, A Mending Maybrain, regenerate 3 wounds the enemy turn unless the fighter takes the damage that turn. So if you're just sitting still, basically you can heal. An Enviro Veil always counts as being in cover when being shot against by 6 inches or more. So like you have like the nano screen almost from Infinity. Hollow projectors, wings and boosters, so you can fly. So you get like the Boba Fett like jump pack. Grappling hooks. This is just like generic equipment. Scopes to increase your damage for your range for your weapons by 2 inches. Utility belts and backpacks increase your carrying capacity, and then a toolkit increases your solve value by 2 automatically, but not for psychic powers. Man, oh man. So what I said about the crunch here, like so many pieces of equipment, different types of grenades. And we got a glossary, so turn sequence of so how do you create a game? So you place the turn on the board, alternating between players. Roll a d6 to determine the number of barriers. Place the barriers. D3 for shortcuts, D6 for hidden features, D6 to determine the objectives, D6 for your deployment zone, determine the zone you're deploying in, deploy all fighters, and then play. And the turn order is the player's roll dice who starts first. Select a fighter that has not been activated this turn. Declare your first action, complete your first action, resolve the after action sequence of damage, movement, etc. Record any XP. Record any status changes, declare your second action, complete your second action, and then a new turn begins. Each game board should have several interactive features in addition to normal terrain. So barriers, these are defined as like walls basically, but they can be moved through with a solve 10. Shortcuts are 2 markers placed between 2 pieces of terrain. So basically think of it as like a teleport point, but it's like a duct you're crawling through or some little like, where you physically couldn't fit the model, but they get to slip through. Shortcuts have a 50% chance to be destroyed after each use, and they're removed from the board. And then interactives. These are like not objectives, but like loot boxes, basically. They could be a hidden stash, a hidden danger, or a hidden shortcut. You could find things like medicine, adrenal shots, anti-pain sprays, a mighty lozenge to increase your strength, a vial of brain aid, or an impact grenade. And then consumables can be retained for a future game. You can hang on to them. And then tons of different objectives. So things like you're looking for informants, a person of interest, a specimen that you need to steal, data, a significant item. This is what the GRL has sent you to find, basically. Or to assess the area. So various points in the data can be captured across the map. Move within an inch of the objective and perform a solve 10 action. The objective is then captured and removed from the board, and you gain an objective point. They can't be lost once collected. And this is like, and then it shows like where you deploy your objectives. So like 3 points mobile, they move around, 2 points, 1 for each team, 6 points fixed on the table, 9 points fixed on the table. Most points captured wins. You play 5 turns. The game actually automatically ends if one team reaches 5 points, because then you can't beat them. And then a bunch of different deployment styles based on, just a dice roll. So 3-inch deployments, 8-inch corner deployments, 6-inch square deployments, L deployments, scatter deployment across 2 corners, and then scatter deployment across 2 sides. And that's it. Game lasts 5 turns. All right, post-game sequence. So here we're into the campaign rules, because of course this game is a campaign game. Once a game has been resolved, move to the post-game phase. A successful crew is awarded the respective chore reward, or black market price. If there's no winners, no chores received. In the aftermath section, there'll be injured fighters, experience gained, new skills unlocked, and potentially valuable discoveries. So desperation. When playing a series of games in a campaign, it is beneficial to have all players playing a similar crew power. So if a player's crew total falls behind other crews by 200 credits or more, they're eligible for a credit loan. This loan will be 150 credits, which is paid back through a 50% tax on income until 165. So balance plus 10% has been paid back. So basically, you have to pay with interest. I like this catch-up mechanic. This is actually a really clever piece of game design where, because this is like a corporatocracy game with the GRL, they want people to take out loans because it indebts them. So it's just a clever, like, story-driven game mechanic. I do like that. And then injury for all human fighters that were taken out of action during a game. Now, depending on your crew, like if you're a sanctioned rogue or corporate, you roll a d20 in the corresponding table. 1 to 2 is captured, 3 to 6 injured, 7 to 18 full recovery, and then 19 to 20 you get a lucky find. You find something cool while you're running away. Rogue crews, however, they've got less access to being taken care of. So 1's captured, 2's amnesia, 3, 4, 5 is broken ribs, exhaustion, concussion, detached retina, shattered leg, 8 to 10's a light wound, 11 to 14 is a deep wound, and this is all just cash payments basically. And then 15 plus is a full recovery. 17 is fearsome, get horrific wounds. And then 18 is find an injured enemy fighter. So you basically grab somebody on the way out. 19 is lost in hostile territory. And then 20 is lucky find. All fighters who remain active at the end of the game can conduct a sweep of the area in search of useful information and make a discovery roll. The number of discovery dice roll is based on the number of fighters active as a percentage of the total crew size. So it's D6, 2D6, 3D6, and then 46 if 76 to 100% of your crew is still alive. On a 1 to 4, you find nothing. Not even a sausage. And then a 5 to 11, it's discarded supplies, collect a random consumable. 12 to 15, a discarded item, collect a random common item. 16 to 18, a fallen fighter, collect 2 random common items. 19, a local trader, you have the option to buy a rare item for half off. And 20 is a valuable stash. You get a random rare item. And 21 to 24, an adventurous local, you have the option to hire a new crew member at a 50% discount. If the crew loses more credits than it gains, the crew will owe an equal amount at the end of the next game. This debt rolls over in each end of game and must be paid before any crew improvements. So basically, if you have to pay to recover your guys, then you have to keep paying out every game until you've paid it back, and you don't get any money until you do. All right, experience. You get an experience point for combat, taking someone into action. Competence, solving or manifesting something. Defense, if you're alive at the end of the game. Shooting, take somebody out in shooting action. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 potential XP. Keep track of the number of solves. Track out each fighter taken out of action. If a fighter's taken out of action by an effect, the XP will count as the combat the fighter's in. So for instance, if you poison somebody when you're in combat with them, you get that experience point. So if you, at level 1, do a combat, take an enemy out of action with a combat, you get an XP. At level 1, if you do a competence solves in game, you get 3. Then you get a 3 XP. Defense, remain in action at the end of the game, you get 1. Shooting, you get 1. Each fighter starts at level 1. At level 1, a fighter must gain the required XP to level up in a particular category. And upon leveling up, the XP tally resets to 0, and any excess XP is added. The new fighter progresses to the next level. So you level up by earning XP in each of those areas. So for each shooting level, a fighter has 50% chance to get +1 permanent damage. And you have a 50% chance to get either a stat or an ability. A fighter that participates in a game gains a hit point automatically. So as long as you participate, you earn a new hit point every time. And then your abilities are things like your role and find what you get in combat. So first, a hunter. Increase the movement towards units that are less than half their starting wounds. Disarm. If an enemy fighter is equipped with a one-handed melee weapon, you can remove it as a combat action once per turn. Fancy footwork. Each activation of the fighter is engaged with an enemy. You may move around the enemy fighter while remaining in base contact. Or berserk. During any combat action, you can opt to take 2 additional self-inflicted wounds to deal 4 additional damage to the opponent. Competence, you can throw back grenades that are thrown at you. Practice makes perfect. Successful solves temporarily increase your intelligence by 1. Sprint, you can make a 3rd move action if the previous 2 moves were also move. Defense, look out, able to redirect shooting actions aimed at another friendly fighter within 2 inches of this fighter, so you can shoot them to yourself. Last stand, when reduced to 0 wounds, you regain 1 wound. Can only happen once per game. And then shooting, things like eagle-eyed, increase the distance of lethal ranges by 1. So pistols will be like lethal 5. Or headshot, if this fighter is taken out of action, it takes an enemy out of action, add 2 to the injury roll for that enemy fighter. Wouldn't you want to reduce the injury roll by 2? That feels like that's a typo. Because higher is better. You would be more likely to make them survive if that was the case. Then training. A crew can send a fighter hone their skills for 50 creds. A fighter can improve their strength, toughness, or intelligence by 1. This will be done any number of times for 50 credits each. Basically, you can just pump your guys up. That feels like I would remove that. Especially for toughness, I would remove that. And then we've got a quick glossary at the end of here. And that's it. Man, space wreckers. Wrecking things in space. So what do I think? Well, this is one of those games where a lot of attention and detail has been put in crew building, And there's a little bit of RNG in the post-game mechanics. Like, you're going to roll for injuries and see what happens there. You're going to have to choose to level up your guys. But the most of this game is going to be mathed out, right? Can my guys apply damage properly to remove the opposing model? And because there's no randomness, there's no surprise failures or surprise successes, it's going to be pretty easy to tech out your guys. I get RNG games because they're very clean and very tight and they don't lead to a lot of rules arguments. The problem with a campaign-based RNG game is, or lack of RNG game is, you are going to get very tempted to make the best crew possible to go fight. This would be a difficult one to play with people that aren't in it for the modeling and the narrative, because there will be like a direct path to just being really good at stuff. And if that path is just money, just spending money so that your toughness is so high that if turns and activations are interchangeable, like if every activation you get your whole toughness back, then like just increasing toughness in a linear method means you just can't hurt people, and then they're immortal and they slowly chip you away. So yeah, I would say that I would be careful with that. I would introduce some stat caps outside the beta for this, certain stat caps. I would definitely introduce being able to buy stat caps. And also most of the rules values toughness over everything else. Toughness is worth 2 other stats in every other instance in this rulebook so far. Except when it comes to buying it, I would say it's 100 to buy toughness. In there, that'd be my next recommendation. And yeah, and this is a game that's going to be real simple to play on the table. Things I'll give them flowers for. I think that the scenario generation is fantastic. I actually really like this section almost more than almost anything else. I think that the random generation of scenarios, the random loot boxes, and in particular the secret routes, so shortcuts, I think are a really clever idea. The fact that they might disappear and go away, I think is really clever. And then I like that there's loot on the table in addition to all the little objective markers and objective points and stuff like that. So obviously the author cares a lot about the story, the emergent storytelling. I do think that that's where the strength of this is going to be. And obviously this, the what you play for is going to matter the most. But this is the kind of game you're going to have to find the right opponent for. Don't try and play this with your competitive 40k buddy, because the freedom of creating warbands and the fact that there's no random failure states and you're just stat stacking to make the best possible damage apply to people is going to make it so that the game is very linearly conceived, and it's going to have an easy path to making maybe some negative play experiences because of that. But I do love the scenario generation section. I think this is probably the best feature of this game. And the core mechanics are simple, but relatively elegant, and the designer's given a lot of thought on crew creation and stuff like that. So who's this game for? If you like tinkering on crew creation, if you like emergent storytelling, and you like sci-fi, this is probably for you. If you want a balanced game, you're not going to get that here. You need to find a balanced opponent, because I do think that that's going to be a bugbear for this. If you play this with the wrong person, they will probably drive it down into maybe an unfun experience. Some of the patrons are asking in the chat if there's a solo mode for this. There isn't one. This is just a PvP game so far, but who knows what comes in the future. So there it is. Checking out some Space Wreckers yet again. Wrecking things in space. We'll be back next week with another episode. And if you are watching this live on YouTube right now on the GMG main channel, then you are probably missing out. This being recorded live by patrons. And you can take an opportunity to nominate a game for yourself, vote in the poll to see what gets covered next, and to check out all of what the world of indie games has to offer. We do new ones every single week, and when the one's airing live on YouTube, we do behind the scenes recording where we do a Q&A before and after, and just a little extra content, probably about 10-15 minutes before and after. So about half an hour's extra content where we just chat, answer questions, and yeah, we go off script, talk about what's coming up, talk about the new games we're going to review and what we've seen, and just kind of catch up for a little while. So we're going to go do that right now. But thanks for watching. We'll see you for more Indie Hour. Until then, I'm Ash.